welcome to The Goddess in Art. In our program this evening, we're going to be looking at the work of an artist who's been inspired by a tradition in art that's 30,000 years old, the goddess in art. My name is Starr Goode, and my guest this evening is painter, printmaker Charles Sherman. Charles is currently on the board of directors of the Graphic Arts Council for the LA County Museum, and he's also served on the board of Artist Equity as the program director. He's also the producer of Group W cable TV series Art and Inspiration. His work can be seen at the San Diego Museum of Art, and he's exhibited in galleries throughout Los Angeles and is now showing at Gorky's downtown. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Starr.
Charles, for the past year, your work has been just exclusively devoted to the goddess. You've been working in black and white shapes of the female figure. Now, these shapes of the female figure, sometimes they're, fanciful and at times almost abstract, and other times they're grotesque and terrifying. Your work seems to cover many different aspects of the goddess, from her loving, nurturing, sort of safe aspect to that wild, death-wielding, unpredictable quality that she has. How did the goddess become a subject in your work?
Well, before I started working with the subject of the goddess, I was interested in life, death, and transformation, and it was real hard for me to deal with humans, so I thought, well, I'm going to work with flowers. And so I was studying flowers and watching, and so naturally, when you study flowers, you watch them grow and you watch them die, and the death aspect of flowers was most interesting to me. I found that when flowers die, they just don't die, but some of them bloom, and then gradually the entire plant dies, and when it's actually dead, it's not really dead because there's still the life. Actually, you can actually see the life dissipating out of it, and it just goes into the environment. So it was the flowers that really brought me into the study of the goddess, and then the idea of transformation and the goddess, and then all of a sudden it just happened. I was working with the goddess.
So in other words, you were wanting to look at life and death, but it was too hard to confront like a human dying, and looking at it in the flowers, and that energy would transform. Even when some part of the flower would die, that energy would go to be blooming another aspect of the flower. Right,
a different part of the flower would come alive. Right, so it was that's where I got inspired to do the goddess. That was part of it. The other part of it is other poets, my peers, other artists and poets, and also anthropologists. Maria Gumbatis and Eric Newman, they wrote books, and the pictures in the books were really interesting to me. So the pictures were so interesting, and I just really felt a kinship with them, and it just happened automatically. The goddess images just started to flow out of me.
So in other words, when the goddess hit you, she hit you fast and really took over.
She hit me fast and hard, yeah.
Yes, because I noticed in your work that it was really, talking of this 30,000-year-old tradition, one of the oldest traditions of art, the goddess in art, that your drawings are very reminiscent of the Paleolithic Venus figurines that were found all throughout ancient Europe, and that your work really does draw on those, and it really is following that line. Of course, you're a contemporary artist, but it shows that, how the goddess has come through your imagination. And then, of course, you have snake goddesses, too, and bird goddesses, which refer to later in Neolithic Europe. They were found all, figurines of those goddesses were found, too. So your work really does draw from, like, this very ancient tradition.
That's right. It draws from the ancient tradition, and right now, currently, those are the images that I like to look at the most. So it's naturally the images that I paint. But I should also say that 20th century masters have also inspired me, like, for instance, Dubuffet, Kandinsky, and Picasso. And but I learned a lot about technique from studying the 20th century masters. But as far as the goddess tradition goes, I took that in from studying the ancient goddess mythologies, and even Greek and Roman and contemporary 20th century goddess mythologies.
One of the interesting things to me about your work is sort of what you were just saying about the transformation, too, because one of the aspects of the goddess, of course, is her ability to transform. And as I said before in your work, that you do have like life-giving aspects and death-giving aspects, and you seem to really be in touch with these goddess energies and different aspects of the goddess. It's something you just really seem tuned into, and also the way you said it just when you were exposed to it, it just really took you over. And I was wondering what your interaction with this goddess energy is, or what that is for you.
Well, it's real interesting because when I get inspired, I just really try and allow this energy to flow through me. I usually don't have any idea what's going to come out, and I'm pretty much surprised at the end when I see what it is. I really try to open myself up and allow this energy that's sent from the goddess. It comes through me and out onto the paper or out onto the canvas. And at the same time, I can't force it either. If it's not there, it just doesn't want to come out. I can't force it, but I don't want to resist it either.
So you can't command the goddess.
No, the goddess has power over me.
I'd like to take a look at some of the work that you've been doing. Like I said, you have been exclusively working with the goddess the past year, but I know that the first bunch of work that we're going to be looking at is something you're very excited about. It's something that you've been working at just the past few weeks, so
right.
I know you're very into this.
Right. This is the work that I'm doing, that I've been doing the past 2 weeks, and it's interesting because to watch the creative process of an artist, what goes on over a 2-week period. So let's take a look at some of these paintings.
All right.
Okay, this first one here is actually a death goddess, and her face is white. There's a black background. The background is actually asphalt, and the flame is an eternal flame. So it's about life and death. Now, black is usually a symbol of death. But white is also a symbol of death, and especially in this case here, the skull is white, and white is a symbol of death because it's a color of bones. So this is about life, death, and transformation, which pretty much all of them are.
Okay, of course that covers the goddess too, because we know that she rules over all the opposites known in life but death. And this is a classical goddess stance too, that she's in with her arms raised over her fist.
Right. This stance has been repeated, thousands and thousands of times throughout history.
All right, let's take a look at the next piece here. Now I know in the next couple of series of things these are things that you've been working at in the past few weeks. Let's take a look at the next piece here.
Okay, this one is a happy goddess, and she is inspired by Dubuffet because I like the materials that Dubuffet worked with, and also the images, real primitive and raw. Again, this is with asphalt. Asphalt's interesting to work with because it comes from the earth, and I can really lay the paint on thick. Or I should say the asphalt on thick. After I laid on all the asphalt on this smooth canvas, I scraped, so the part that's the light color is actually scraped, and then it just reached a point where I just didn't want to do anything else to it. It just seemed finished. And this aspect is a happy aspect of the goddess. She's kind of like surprising somebody or something.
It's interesting because it's the same stance, and yet it's the last painting we saw, and yet the feeling is so much more. It's a very different feeling.
Right. Well, this is about feeling and intuition and emotions, and you can have the same stance but a different look. It's a completely different feeling. So we can go on.
Now I know the next series of slides, pieces of art that you call it the transformation series, and of course we know one of the aspects of the goddess is not her ability to dominate, but the ability or power to transform. And again, as we said in the beginning of the show, you're very concerned with transformation, and I know of the next couple of pieces that you call them the transformation series. Why don't you tell us about that?
Right. Now, these images here are what I want to do is have people look at an image in a different way than they're normally used to looking at images. Now this one, when we first look at this goddess here, we see the white. We see her head, we see her arms coming down to her sides, her legs, and if we continue to look at it, the dark images, the profiles that are facing inward and one arm from each goddess embracing the larger white goddess, we see that. And we usually don't see that at first, but we do see it here. And it's the idea is to see more than what we're normally used to seeing. And my theory is that if people can do this visually, we can also expand our consciousness as far as ideas go. So it's more than just like looking, it's also understanding.
And the thing that I feel is intriguing about this too is how the white, her arms hanging down like that, almost embrace and create the dark. So again, it's the white transforming into the dark and the dark transforming into the white, and each of them creating each other, and again the expansion of perception.
Right. Now this painting is a little bit different from the other ones because there's some color in here. This is from when over a year ago, when I first started doing the goddess paintings. I did some paintings in yellow and red. So the underpainting to this is yellow and red, and then just in the past 2 weeks I thought yellow and red is not what's happening. So I went over it with asphalt and acrylic paint, and that's what that goddess is, asphalt and acrylic paint. Also, on the left side of the image, her breast is actually also the head of a bird. And I incorporate birds in a lot of the paintings that I do. And we'll talk about that as we see other paintings with birds in them.
All right, let's take a look at your next piece of art here.
This is the same idea. I really like the idea of the dark coming, the white embracing the dark, or the light embracing the dark. So I just was experimenting with those shapes, and between her legs there's another kind of like female shape, and it's all this female energy that's moving through me in these goddess paintings.
Yes, and it is again almost a sense of the energy like ascending too, you know, and a bird like rising up.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm studying is Kundalini yoga, and what in Kundalini yoga, the energy actually goes up through a point between the eyes and up through the skull. And so all that energy is really in my paintings too.
And again, as we're looking at these paintings, we see that they do draw on the goddess tradition, you know, just these very almost simple, primitive figures. And yet, of course, we see that they are done by a contemporary artist, you know, because it is you drawing them now, and yet one has a sense of all the resonances of the past in them.
That's right, and it's interesting that some of the sculptures and figurines that were done even 7,000 years ago actually look like they could be done in the 20th century. They're really amazing.
Only 7,000 years ago, as opposed to the 30,000 year old. Let's see the next piece in this series, again, the Transformation series.
This one here is, this one is painted flat. This is just white paint over black gesso. And it's kind of a fantasy type image, but I wanted to have the white over the black here. And when I did this, I had no idea what was going to come out, or when I did any of these, I really didn't know what was going to come out. And at the end, I saw, oh, well, these are kind of like half female, half animal, but whatever it is, it's certainly fantasy, and there's like a little dancer there between her legs.
In this one, you've almost taken the principle to the other extreme, where we see the white first. You know, you've taken that. At first, usually in these, we see the black figure, but in this, it's the white that jumps out at us too. So you're kind of being whimsical with us and tricking us. Just when we think we know what's going on, you throw something else in here.
Right. Now, this is illusion, and it's also sometimes known as trompe l'oeil in art. And we see the white, but that's because we're used to seeing this image. And so we're actually exercising our our vision to see these other things pushing and pulling, and actually the tension that builds between the light and the dark.
And also, it's interesting to me, the halo is again the white transforming into the dark, and the dark into the white, and the circle of that. And of course, the goddess is really a circular energy, because she does have her cycles and spirals through all things.
Right. She. Well, the moon is a perfect example of that, the cycle of the moon and its phases. So we can go on to the next slide now.
Okay, now this looks like very thick asphalt here.
Right, this is really laid on thick. I must have used about a half a gallon of asphalt on this one. And the other stuff that I used is paint compound. It's real thick. Sometimes they use it to fill joints, but I just really wanted to have a raw, primitive effect here. But again, it's that same image of the light embracing the dark. And this one is kind of like grotesque looking. But that's what was there. That's what came out. Some of them are grotesque. Some of them are ugly. But they all kind of, for me, they move me. And hopefully they'll move other people too, whether they're pretty or whether they're ugly. The main thing is that like people think about them. And that's one of the things that I think that art should do. It should incite the mind.
Yes, and in this one, how the skull is almost disconnected, the face is disconnected, even giving it more of a sense of the death. And the feeling, again, like the black figures on the side of the light creating the dark. And I think that one of the hardest aspects in confronting the goddess or in life is confronting the dark aspect, the unpredictability of things, that we don't really know what's going to happen, that we, in our human consciousness, we're not running the world here, running the show. And I think that's one of the things that's so important about your work, is to put the dark forward, to put, because that is an aspect of life and we can't ignore it. And that face of the goddess, of all her faces, I think is the hardest to take in.
Yeah, the dark is very important. And also with these, I have a lot of self-imposed limitations. For instance, just black and white, which symbolizes, a duality for one thing, and positive and negative, life and death.
Again, in working with the black and white, you are really working with those polarities, and there's a real sort of almost philosophic sense of your work here on that.
Right. The whole thing is the whole philosophy in painting. It all becomes one.
Now, we've been talking about some of the dark aspects of the goddess, and what you do show in your work. And yet behind us we have this mural that you did, which is called the Nine Muses. And of course the Muses is the creative aspect of the goddess, and this is really quite a contrast to some of the things we've seen before, even though it is the black and white. And of course in our Western tradition, in old Europe, the lunar or triple goddess was the foundation, and under the Greeks became the ninefold muse, these goddesses that inspire all the arts and all the sciences and really all of creativity. So as an artist, obviously inspiration is something that's very important to you.
Right. These nine muses really were so inspiring to me. Just the idea that the muses are the source of inspiration for the arts and sciences, just like when I read that, I thought, wow, that's so interesting. I've really got to start, like, who are these goddesses, And so I started to study it, and then this is my interpretation of the Nine Muses. And the Nine Muses is a theme that's been done before. It's not quite as popular as the Three Graces, which has also been done, but this is the Nine Muses. And for instance, one of the figures is Erato, who is the goddess of erotic poetry. Urania is the goddess of astronomy and astrology. And so this is my interpretation of the Nine Muses, which are inspiring to me. I would like to say that this image here of the Nine Muses is actually a print. It's a unique print. It's a blueprint, and the original was smaller, and I enlarged it with the blueprint machine, and then I worked over it with a brush, and so it makes it a unique print. This is a proof. So here's some pictures. This is a good.
Of course, the name of this show is The Goddess in Art here, so what could be more perfect than showing these goddesses? Okay, now here's a print.
Okay, now here's another print. This one is like the other ones that we saw a few minutes ago, except this one I wanted to see if I could transfer the feeling of thick paint on a thin surface. So this is a blueprint, and I worked over the blueprint with India ink and some black watercolor, and it really looks practically exactly like a lithograph with a wash, but it's actually an ink wash on there, and it's real hard to tell the difference unless you have a lot of experience with lithography and litho washes.
Yes, well, again, it really does have that primitive quality, and you almost feel like you could stumble in some modern cave and see this.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, well, so that's your transformation series.
Right. That is, there's one more on here, I think, that
Okay,
I'd
do
like
we
to
have
talk about.
the next piece of art? Okay.
Right. Okay. Now this one here was really, this image here is, this is the dark, devouring goddess, and this was the culmination of the past work that I've done. This was the last painting that I did. To me, this is the darkest of the dark. It's asphalt, and when I was painting this, I really didn't know exactly what was coming out, and when it was finished, I saw, I could articulate what it was. And you can see that there's bird-shaped faces underneath their arms facing towards each other in black. And underneath that, there is white birds, and you can see their eyes. Beneath that, or the nose, it's kind of like if you see the eyes of the birds, they are also where the breasts are of this goddess, and the vagina is also a nose. Underneath that shape are two breasts facing outward, and then underneath that you can see hands. Now, if you follow the hands up, they make the shape of the back of the bird. So the goddess here is holding on to the birds, and this is pretty much like spiritual bondage. Birds in Christianity have been symbols of messengers of gods, and in goddess mythology they've been a bridge between the earth, the sea, and the air. But to me, a bird is a symbol of freedom, and here the birds are just really enslaved with this devouring goddess, and the hands are actually ready to take in or devour anything in her way. And so this is really the darkest example of, I feel that she exemplifies the dark side of the goddess.
Yes, she definitely does, and yet there is a slight, always with the goddess there is the opposite, and in the vagina, that energy somewhat rising up, you have the sense, there's a slight sense of hope of it turning on itself and something creative coming from it.
Yeah.
I know also that in the past year you have been working in black and white ink drawings that did lead to this work that we've just been seeing here, and those were all, and you did a portfolio of that you called the Goddess Image Book, and I'd like to take a look at some of those images too.
Okay, we'll run through these fairly quickly here. This one is Femalia, F-E-M-A-I-L-I-A, and Femalia is the goddess that I put on all my she's the goddess that I put on all my mail, and I just say, this is Femalia, the goddess of mail art. This is first-class mail, first-class goddess.
There's such a difference between the terrifying image of that and the beauty and dignity of this goddess image with the black and the white. And always you're working with the opposites.
Right.
And the sense of the bird here and its freedom.
Mm-hmm. The Femalia is definitely a goddess of freedom. This one is Venus in Heat. This one was on the front cover of a local poetry book. And this is just about the goddess and passion and love, and
well, she certainly is a fire there,
yeah,
isn't she?
There's a fire burning in her. Okay, the next one is one of my favorites because this is Venus of Venice. That's Venice, California, and in here you see, when you first look at it, you just see the white area, her face, and then over here is like a claw, which would be something that could come out of the ocean at Venice. A high heel shoe on the other side. But if you look between the white, you can see like bird shapes here. Bird here, bird here. If you turn it this way, a bird coming up here, and there's a bird over here. And these are all ink drawings. This is brush and ink, not to be confused with pen and ink.
Okay, Charles, I wanted to ask you, I've noticed in doing this show, you know, and tuning into the goddess energy, it really seems to be such an explosion of it. And there's so many artists working in this media, but there's not that many men. I know there are men out there like yourself who are working in it. And what's it like to be one of the men working in this energy here?
Scary.
Well, it's scary for all of us.
It's true. It's true. There's mostly women are involved with the goddess, but I feel that this whole energy that's been in the air now for several years is very important for not just women to examine, but everyone to examine. The goddess hasn't really been around much in art for the first half of the 20th century. She's been pretty much ignored. In fact, the Museum of Modern Art catalog, in all of what they consider modernism, doesn't have any major paintings of goddesses or gods, for that matter, except one, some real controversial by Munch, which is a bare-breasted Madonna, which would be a goddess. But
but now something seems to be really turning on that, where there's so many artists now who are involved in this energy, and it really seems to be exploding out. And we know that there's a goddess in every woman, but you're saying there's a goddess in every man there too.
That's right. There's a goddess. The goddess energy is all around, and it's important for men as well as women to tap into this energy. It's a creative energy, and it's a very powerful energy.
It's also a destructive energy too, so I feel it's not only just technological reason gone mad that might destroy us, but if we don't contact the dark feminine power too, that could explode in some sort of very eruptive way, and that needs to be looked at. And I think it's interesting what you're saying, for men to really contact that female energy in them too.
It's very important for men and women, for women to find the goddess and the god in them, and for men to find to understand the goddess within them. And we need this balance. And if there's one thing that I would like to say about the goddess, is that the goddess is for everybody.
Thank you, Charles.